The massive council chamber floated in space like a giant glass bubble. Inside, delegates from 47 different alien species sat in curved rows around a central platform. The chamber orbited a neutron star called Axios Prime, and its light made everything glow with a strange blue color. Cathara stood on the platform in the center. She was tall and thin, made of what looked like living crystal. Her body was mostly clear, but light moved through her like water. Right now, that light was dim and sad. She was the last official speaker for her people, the Vullians. Most of her kind were already dead. She pressed a button on the small device in her hand. Above her head, a huge hologram appeared. It showed a planet from space. The planet looked green and blue, with white clouds swirling around it. It was beautiful. "This was Valius Prime," she said. Her voice was like wind chimes, but heavy with sadness. "Home to 12 billion of my people. This image was taken 6 months ago." She pressed another button. The same planet appeared, but now it was gray and dead. No clouds, no blue oceans, just a ball of rock floating in space. "This was taken yesterday," she whispered. A low murmur went through the chamber. Some delegates shifted in their seats. Others made clicking or humming sounds that meant different things in their languages. "The harvesters did this," Cathara continued. "They came from deep space in ships we have never seen before. They did not try to talk. They did not make demands. They just began to consume everything. She showed more holograms. Massive black ships that looked like giant insects. Beams of red light that turned trees, animals, and people into gray liquid. Cities being dissolved like sugar and water. "We tried to fight them," she said. "Our defense fleets were strong. Our weapons were advanced. It did not matter. The harvesters learned from every battle. They adapted to our tactics. They became stronger while we became weaker." The hologram changed to show space battles. Valian ships with smooth curves and bright energy weapons faced off against the dark harvester vessels. At first, the Valians seemed to win some fights. But as the images continued, the harvester ships began to move differently. They avoided the energy weapons. They struck at weak points. Soon, Valian ships were exploding one after another. "These machines are not just destroying us," Cathara said. Her voice was getting stronger, more desperate. "They are learning, growing. Each world they consume makes them smarter and stronger. We estimate they have destroyed 43 star systems in the past year. At their current rate, they will consume the entire outer rim within 2 years." Liquid light began to flow down her crystal face. These were tears, though they looked more like glowing water than anything humans would recognize. "My people are dying," she said. "Our evacuation ships are failing. Our colonies are falling one by one. We cannot stop them alone. We have come before this council to beg for help. Please, send your fleets to help us fight. If we work together, we might still stop them before they reach the core worlds." She looked around the chamber at all the different alien faces. Some had multiple eyes. Others had tentacles instead of arms. A few looked almost human, while others were so strange it was hard to tell which end was their head. But they all had one thing in common. They all looked uncomfortable. The chairman of the council was a being called High Chancellor Vex Star. He looked like a gray tree with eyes all along his trunk. He spoke in a voice that sounded like rustling leaves. "The council thanks Ambassador Cathara for her presentation," he said formally. "We will now hear arguments from member delegates." One by one, representatives from different species stood up to speak. The Takari delegate was a creature that looked like a walking fish with arms. She talked about trade routes and economic costs. The war would be expensive. It would disrupt business across the galaxy. the representative from the Zephyrian Empire, looked like a blue-skinned human with 4 arms. He spoke about treaty obligations. His people were already committed to defending against pirates in another part of the galaxy. They could not spare ships for this fight. That an ancient being called an Eldari stood next. She was so old that parts of her body had turned to stone. She talked about historical precedent. The Council had never interfered in conflicts beyond the established borders. To do so would set a dangerous example. More delegates spoke. Each had reasons why they could not help. Some were good reasons. Some were just excuses. But the result was the same. One by one, they all said no. Finally, Chancellor Vextar called for a vote. All in favor of military intervention against the Harvester threat? He asked that no one raised a hand or tentacle or claw. All opposed? 46 delegates indicated their opposition in various ways. Any abstentions? Only one hand went up. It belonged to Admiral Sarah Chun from Earth. She was human, which made her unusual in the Council. Humans were the newest members of the Galactic Confederacy. Most other species thought of them as useful workers, but not very important politically. The motion fails, Chancellor Vextar announced. The Council will not authorize military action against the Harvesters. This session is adjourned. Delegates began filing out of the chamber. Many were already talking about dinner plans and upcoming trade meetings. The Harvester crisis was over for them. It was not their problem anymore. Kethara remained on the platform. Her crystal body was shaking as more liquid light flowed down her face. She had failed. Her people would die, and no one cared enough to help. She started to walk toward the exit when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned and saw Admiral Chun approaching. The human was shorter than most of the other delegates, with brown skin and black hair streaked with gray. She wore a simple blue uniform instead of the elaborate robes that other species preferred. Chun stopped in front of Kethara. She tried to speak in the Valian language, though her pronunciation was terrible. "We help you," she said in broken Valian words. "Human fleet come? We fight together." Kethara stared at her. "Your government will not allow this. Your council voted to abstain, not to help." Chun smiled, though there was sadness in her eyes. "Sometimes," she said, switching to Galactic common language, "a person has to decide what is right, regardless of what governments say. My ships will come. We may not be big or strong, but we will help you fight." For the first time in months, Kaisara felt something other than despair. It was not much hope, but it was something. Why? She asked. Why would humans risk everything for strangers? Chun looked back at the emptying council chamber, where delegates were laughing and making business deals while a civilization died. "Because," she said quietly, "someone has to care." Admiral Sarah Chun stood in her private quarters aboard the Earth flagship Mumbai, staring out at the stars through her window. 3 days had passed since she made her promise to Kethara, and already everything was falling apart. Her communication panel was flashing with incoming messages. Most of them were angry. The President of Earth wanted to speak with her immediately. The Defense Secretary had sent 12 messages demanding she return to Earth at once. The Galactic Confederacy had filed a formal complaint about humans acting without authorization. Chun turned away from the window and activated her personal communicator. Captain Marcus Webb appeared on the screen. He was her second in command and had been her friend for 20 years. His face looked tired and worried. "Sarah, you need to see the news feeds from Earth," he said without greeting. "The politicians are going crazy. They say you are going to start a war that will destroy humanity. What exactly are they saying?" Chun asked. "The president held a press conference an hour ago. He said your actions do not represent Earth government policy. He ordered all Earth ships to return to home base immediately. He also said any officers who follow your orders instead of his will face court-martial. Chun sat down heavily in her chair. She had expected this, but it still hurt. Her own government was abandoning the Valians just like everyone else. How many ships do we have left? She asked. Webb checked his tablet. 37 vessels agreed to stay with us. That includes the Mumbai and most of the smaller patrol ships. We lost the big battleships. Their captains decided to follow Earth government orders. 37 ships. It was not much against an enemy that had destroyed entire fleets. But it was something. There is more bad news, Webb continued. The Confederacy has frozen all human trade accounts. They say it is temporary until we stop our military actions. But without those accounts, we cannot buy fuel or supplies from any Confederacy worlds. Chun nodded. She had expected this too. When you broke the rules, there were always consequences. Gather all the ship captains for a meeting in 2 hours, she said. We need to tell them exactly what they are getting into. Any captain who wants to leave can do so with no hard feelings. And if they all decide to leave? Chun looked back out at the stars. Somewhere out there, harvester ships were destroying another world while politicians argued about trade agreements and treaties. Then I will take the Mumbai alone, she said. 2 hours later, 37 ship captains gathered in the Mumbai's main conference room. Some attended in person, while others appeared as holograms from their ships. They were a mixed group. Some were old military officers like Chun. Others were younger captains of cargo ships or research vessels. A few were pilots of small patrol boats that were barely bigger than shuttles. Chun stood at the front of the room and told them the truth about their situation. Earth government had disowned them. The Confederacy would not help them. They would have no official support and limited supplies. They were going to fight an enemy that had destroyed advanced civilizations with much better technology than humans possessed. I want to be clear about something, Chun said. We are probably going to lose. The harvesters have weapons we do not understand and ships that can adapt to any attack. Most of us will likely die fighting them. Any captain who wants to go home should leave now. No one will think less of you. The room was quiet for a long moment. Then Captain Lisa Park of the cargo ship Phoenix raised her hand. She was young, maybe 30 years old, with short red hair and determined eyes. Admiral, I have a question, she said. Did you see the footage Ambassador Keth Ara showed us? The planets being consumed? The cities being dissolved? Yes, Chun replied. Then I have my answer. My ship may not be a warship, but it has cargo holds. I can carry refugees. I can transport supplies. I will help however I can. One by one, other captains spoke up. The captain of the research vessel Discovery said his ship had advanced sensors that might be useful for detecting harvester movements. The patrol boat captains said their small size might let them get close to enemy ships without being noticed. Even the captains of civilian vessels found ways they could contribute. In the end, all 37 captains voted to stay. Chun felt something she had not felt in days. Hope. Thank you, she said simply. Now let us figure out how to fight a war we cannot win. 3 weeks later, the human fleet arrived at New Kellara, a Valian colony world on the edge of Harvester territory. What they found there was worse than anyone had expected. The planet was still alive, but barely. Half the continents had been stripped of all plant life. The oceans were turning gray as harvester machines processed the marine life. Thousands of Valian refugee ships filled the space around the planet, trying to evacuate the remaining population. Kathara met them aboard the Mumbai. She looked even more fragile than before, her crystal body dim and flickering. 3 more systems have fallen since we last spoke, she told Chun. The harvesters are moving faster now. They seem to be learning new techniques for processing worlds. What used to take them months now takes weeks. Chun studied the tactical displays showing harvester ship movements. The enemy vessels moved in perfect formation, like parts of a single mind. Their ships were black and angular, covered in strange symbols that seemed to shift when you looked at them directly. "We need to understand how they work," Chun said. "Captain Webb, I want our science team studying every piece of harvester technology we can find. Look for weaknesses. Look for patterns. Look for anything we can use against them." "What about the evacuation?" asked Captain Park. "There are still millions of aliens down there." "We do both," Chun said. "We save who we can while we learn how to fight." "Captain Park, take your cargo ships and start loading refugees." Captain Webb organized the patrol boats to provide escort. "I want our science ships scanning everything the harvesters left behind." As the human ships began their work, Cathara shared something that changed everything they thought they knew about the enemy. "Our deep space observatories detected something disturbing," she said, calling up a holographic display. "The harvesters are not randomly destroying systems. They are building something in the galactic core, using processed organic matter as construction material." The display showed a massive structure taking shape near the galaxy's central black hole. It was enormous, larger than any space station ever built. Strange energy patterns flowed around it like lightning. "What is it?" Chun asked. "We do not know," Cathara replied. "But our scientists have detected dimensional distortions around it. Whatever the harvesters are building, it is affecting the fabric of space itself." Chun stared at the image. She had thought the harvesters were just destroyers, machines gone wrong from some ancient war. But this suggested something else. The harvesters had a plan. They had a purpose. How long before they finished building it? She asked. "At their current rate of consumption, our scientists estimate 6 months, Cathara said. "Maybe less. 6 months to stop an enemy that had destroyed dozens of advanced civilizations. 6 months to save not just the aliens, but possibly all life in the galaxy." Chun looked around at her small fleet of human ships and refugee vessels that had seemed impossible. But then she thought about the 37 captains who had chosen to stay when they could have gone home safely. She thought about Captain Park loading refugee children onto her cargo ship, even though harvester scouts might attack at any moment. She thought about the young patrol boat pilots volunteering for the most dangerous missions. Maybe humans could not win through superior technology or firepower, but they had something the other council species seemed to lack. They had the willingness to try impossible things. "Then we better get started," Chun said. Asterisk. The mining colony of Zarian 7 was dying when Captain Marcus Webb arrived with his strike force. Through the view screen of his ship, the Defiance, he could see massive black harvester vessels in orbit around the planet. Red beams of energy shot down from the ships to the surface, and Webb knew those beams were dissolving everything they touched. "How many people are still down there?" Webb asked his communications officer. "Unknown, sir. We are getting some emergency signals, but they are getting weaker. The harvesters have been working on this planet for 6 hours. 6 hours. In the old days, before the harvesters, a planet could hold out for months against an invading force. Now entire worlds died in less than a day." Webb looked at his small fleet. 12 ships, most of them converted cargo haulers and mining vessels. They carried 4,000 Velian refugees who had nowhere else to go, and crews of humans who had volunteered for what everyone knew was a suicide mission. The plan was simple, which was good, because simple plans were the only kind that worked when everything went wrong. The harvester ships were focused on the planet, processing its surface methodically. They had not yet noticed the approaching human fleet. Webb intended to use that advantage for as long as possible. "All ships, this is Defiance," Webb said into his communicator. Remember, we are not trying to destroy these ships. We just need to get close enough to study them and rescue anyone we can. Stick to the plan. The plan was unlike anything any other species had tried against the harvesters. Instead of engaging from a safe distance with long-range weapons, the human ships were going to fly straight at the enemy vessels. Instead of trying to preserve their ships and crews, they were treating both as resources to be spent for information thought it was insane by galactic military standards. It was also the most human thing possible. "Harvester ships are turning toward us," reported the center operator. 3 Dreadnought-class vessels, each one 3 times our size. "Perfect," Webb said. "That means they noticed us. Alpha Group, begin your approach. Remember, act like you are running away scared." 4 of the human ships suddenly changed course, turning away from the Harvester fleet as if they were trying to escape. The Harvester vessels immediately moved to intercept them, just as Webb had hoped. The ancient machines seemed to view the fleeing humans as easy targets. "Beta Group." "Now," Webb ordered, while the Harvesters chased the first group of ships. 8 more human vessels came in from a different angle. They were flying in a tight formation, their cargo holds packed with explosives and volunteer boarding teams. The lead Harvester ship turned to face this new threat, but it was too late. The humans were already too close for the massive vessel to use its main weapons effectively. The Harvester tried to retreat, but human ships were smaller and more maneuverable. "All ships, ramming speed," Webb ordered. This was the part that made other species think humans were crazy. Instead of trying to fight the Harvester ships with conventional weapons, the human vessels flew directly at them. At the last second, each ship launched its crew in escape pods, then crashed into the Harvester hull at maximum speed. The explosions were massive. Each human ship carried enough nuclear charges to crack a small moon. When they detonated against the Harvester vessels, they tore huge holes in the enemy armor. "Boarding teams, go!" Webb shouted. This was the most dangerous part of the plan. While the Harvester ships were still recovering from the explosions, teams of human volunteers flew through the gaps in their hulls. Each team carried recording equipment and had orders to learn everything they could about Harvester technology before the enemy ships could repair themselves. Webb led one of the boarding teams personally. He flew his small shuttle through a hole in the Harvester ship's side and found himself in a corridor that looked like the inside of a living creature. The walls pulsed with organic rhythms, and strange symbols moved across surfaces like flowing water. "This is not a machine," reported Sergeant Kim over the radio. She was leading another team deeper into the ship. "It is part biological. The walls are warm to the touch, and they seem to be breathing." Webb pushed deeper into the vessel, his team recording everything they saw. The Harvester ship was healing itself around them. The hole they had entered through was already beginning to close. They had minutes at most before the ship would trap them inside. "Found something," called Private Rodriguez from up ahead. "Looks like a data core or control center." Webb reached the chamber Rodriguez had discovered. It was filled with crystalline structures that pulsed with internal light. Streams of information flowed through the crystals like water through pipes. "Download everything you can," Webb ordered his tech specialist. "We need to understand how they think." The tech specialist, a young woman named Dr. Sarah Kim, connected her equipment to one of the crystal structures. Immediately, her face went pale. "Captain, this is not just a ship," she said. "It is connected to something vast. I am seeing data streams from hundreds of other vessels, maybe thousands. They are all part of a single network. Can you trace the network back to its source?" Webb asked. "I am trying, but the connections go all the way to the galactic core. There is something huge coordinating all of this." An alarm began sounding throughout the Harvester ship. The walls around them started moving, trying to trap the boarding teams inside. Webb knew their time was up. All teams fall back to extraction points, he ordered. We got what we came for. Getting out was harder than getting in. The harvester ship was fully alert now, and its defenses were activating. Walls shifted to block corridors. Energy fields tried to trap the humans in dead-end chambers. But the boarding teams had expected this. They carried explosive charges to blast through obstacles and had practiced emergency extraction procedures. Webb's team reached their shuttle just as the hole in the ship's hull finished closing. They flew out through a gap barely large enough for their small vessel. Pursued by harvester defense drones that looked like flying metal spiders. All teams report in, Webb called once they were clear of the enemy ships. The news was mixed. 2 of the boarding teams had not made it out. 17 brave volunteers were gone, either killed by harvester defenses or trapped inside the alien vessels. But the remaining teams had gathered massive amounts of data about harvester technology and tactics. Did we save anyone from the planet? Webb asked. Affirmative, reported Captain Park from the rescue ship Phoenix. We pulled 800 survivors from the mining facilities before the harvesters could process them. They are scared but alive. Webb looked back at the harvester ships. The vessels were already repairing themselves, getting ready to continue their work. Soon Zarian 7 would be completely dead. Another gray rock floating in space. But the human attack had accomplished something important. For the first time, someone had boarded harvester ships and lived to tell about it. The data they had collected might hold the key to understanding their enemy. All ships set course for New Kelara, Webb ordered. We have a lot of work to do. As the human fleet withdrew, something unexpected happened. The lead harvester ship changed course. Instead of returning to its systematic consumption of Zarian 7, it began following the human ships at a distance. Sir, reported the sensor operator, that harvester is tracking us. I see it, Webb replied. Let it come. Maybe it will learn something about humans. What Webb did not know was that the harvester was indeed learning. Its artificial intelligence was analyzing the human attack, trying to understand why these primitive beings had acted in ways that made no logical sense. The humans had sacrificed valuable ships and crew members for minimal tactical gain. They had risked their own lives to save strangers they had never met. By the standards of every other species the harvesters had encountered, the human behavior was irrational and inefficient. But the humans had succeeded where advanced civilizations had failed. They had penetrated harvester defenses and stolen vital information. The harvester intelligence found this contradiction disturbing. Its programming was designed to predict and counter logical opponents. But how could it fight an enemy that did not follow logic? Deep in the galactic core, the vast intelligence that controlled all harvester operations received the report from Zarian 7. For the first time in millions of years, it encountered something it did not understand. The humans were going to be a problem. Asterisk. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike any in recorded history. Instead of the usual formal procedures, delegates were shouting at each other across the chamber. Some spoke in anger, others in fear. All of them were talking about the same thing, what the humans had done at XER Ion-7. High. Chancellor Vextar struggled to maintain order. His tree-like form swayed as he called for quiet with his rustling voice, but few delegates were listening. The humans have violated every principle of civilized warfare, shouted the Takari delegate, her fish-like face turning darker shades of blue. They sacrificed their own ships. They sent soldiers on suicide missions. This is terrorism, not military action. Worse than terrorism, added the Zephyrian representative. They have provoked the harvesters. Our intelligence sources report increased harvester activity near several core worlds. The humans have made things worse for all of us. The Eldari delegate stood slowly, her ancient stone and flesh form creaking with age. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of thousands of years. "In all my time," she said, "I have never seen such reckless disregard for galactic law. Earth must be expelled from the Confederacy immediately. Their actions threaten the stability we have worked millennia to build." But not all delegates agreed. The representative from Kepler Colony, a small human settlement, stood up. Dr. James Mitchell was a thin man with graying hair who usually said very little during council sessions. "With respect to the honored delegates," he said, "I think we are missing something important. Yes, the human fleet used unconventional tactics, but they also achieved something no one else has managed. They boarded harvester ships and returned with data. For the first time, we have real intelligence about our enemy. Intelligence gathered through barbaric methods," the Takari delegates snapped. "They turned their own people into weapons. No civilized species would do such a thing." "No," Dr. Mitchell replied quietly. "And that might be exactly why all the civilized species have failed against the harvesters." Before anyone could respond, the chamber's main screen activated. Admiral Sarah Chun's face appeared, broadcasting from her flagship Mumbai. Behind her, the bridge showed damage from recent battles, and several crew members wore bandages. "Honored delegates," Chen said, "I know you did not invite me to speak, but I have information you need to hear." "This is highly irregular," Chancellor Vextar protested. "Admiral Chun, you are currently operating outside Confederacy authority. You have no right to address this body. Then I ask you to listen as a fellow being who cares about our galaxy's survival," Chun replied. She gestured to someone off-screen, and Kethara stepped into view. The Valiant's crystal form was brighter than it had been in months, but her expression was grim. "Ambassador Kethara has discovered something about the harvester construction in the galactic core," Chun continued. "Show them." The chamber's displays changed to show the massive structure the harvesters were building near the galaxy's central black hole. But now the image was clearer, more detailed. The structure was enormous, stretching across millions of kilometers. Energy patterns flowed around it like living things. "Our analysis of data recovered from the boarding operations has revealed the true purpose of this construction," Kethara said. "It is not a weapon. It is not a fortress. It is a bridge. A bridge to where?" asked Chancellor Vextar. "To another universe," Kethara replied. "The harvesters are not trying to conquer our galaxy. They are trying to escape from it. But to power their dimensional bridge, they need to process all organic life in the galaxy. Every living thing will be consumed to fuel their escape." The chamber fell silent. The political arguments about human tactics suddenly seemed very small. "How long do we have?" asked Dr. Mitchell. "Based on their current consumption rate, 6 weeks, Chun answered. "Maybe less. They have accelerated their timeline since our attack at Zarian 7. The Eldari delegate shook her head. "Even if this is true, what can we do? The Confederacy's combined fleets could not stop the harvesters. A few human ships certainly cannot." "Maybe not," Chun admitted. "But we have learned something important. The harvesters are designed to fight logical opponents. Their artificial intelligence adapts by predicting enemy behavior based on rational self-interest. But humans don't always act rationally. We do things that don't make logical sense, like risking our lives to save strangers." She paused, looking directly at the delegates who had refused to help the Volians. "The harvesters' programming cannot predict illogical behavior," Chun continued. "That gives us an advantage, but only if we act quickly. I'm not asking for official Confederacy support anymore. I know that won't come. But individual species, individual ships, individual people can make their own choices." The Tatari delegate stood angrily. "You ask us to abandon our principles, to adopt your barbarian tactics." "No," Chun replied. I'm asking you to remember what those principles were supposed to protect. What good are civilized rules if civilization itself is about to end? Chancellor Vexstar called for order as arguments broke out across the chamber again. But this time, the arguments were different. Instead of just condemning human actions, delegates were debating whether those actions might be necessary. When the formal vote was called, it was closer than before. 23 species voted against supporting the human intervention. 22 voted in favor. 2 abstained. The motion failed, but barely as the session ended and delegates began to leave, something unprecedented happened. Instead of filing out as a group, individual delegates approached the human representation area. They spoke quietly, away from recording devices and official observers. The captain of a Centauri exploration vessel offered his ship services. A Tau Ceti mining company promised supplies. Even some individual crew members from Confederacy naval ships volunteered to join the human fleet, resigning their official commissions to do so. By the end of the day, Admiral Chun had received more than 200 private offers of support. Ships, supplies, crew members, intelligence, and technical expertise. The Confederacy as an institution might lack the courage to act, but individuals within it had been inspired by humanity's example. Cathara watched the steady stream of volunteers with amazement. I do not understand, she told Chun. Why are they willing to help now when their governments will not? Chun smiled sadly. Because sometimes it takes seeing someone else be brave before you can find your own courage. Governments worry about politics and economics and public opinion, but individuals can choose to do what's right. Will it be enough? Cathara asked. Chun looked at the data about the Harvester Bridge construction. 6 weeks to stop an enemy that had destroyed dozens of advanced civilizations. Even with the new volunteers, their fleet would still be vastly outnumbered and outgunned. I don't know, she admitted. But for the first time since this started, I think we might have a chance. In the depths of space, Harvester ships received new orders from their central intelligence. The bridge construction was entering its final phase. Soon they would have consumed enough organic matter to power their escape to a new universe, leaving this dying galaxy behind. But the Central Intelligence was troubled by reports from the front lines. The humans continued to act in unpredictable ways. They rescued refugees when they should have fled. They sacrificed valuable resources for minimal tactical gains. They made decisions based on emotion rather than logic. The Harvester Intelligence had been created by a species that valued efficiency above all else. It understood sacrifice for logical purposes, but it could not comprehend sacrifice for emotional reasons. The humans were becoming a significant unknown variable in its calculations. For the first time in its existence, the vast artificial mind experienced something resembling uncertainty. It increased the priority of eliminating human forces and accelerated the bridge construction schedule. The final battle was approaching, and neither side was entirely sure they understood their enemy. The combined fleet that approached the galactic core was unlike anything in recorded history. Human ships flew alongside Valian crystal vessels. Tau Ceti mining barges carried weapons next to Centauri exploration ships. Volunteers from dozens of species had abandoned their official duties to join Admiral Chun's desperate mission. In total, they had 300 ships. It sounded impressive until you saw what they were flying toward. The Harvester Bridge dominated the space around the galaxy's central black hole. It was larger than any space station ever built, stretching across millions of kilometers. The structure looked like a massive crystalline web, with energy flowing through it like blood through veins. Around it, thousands of Harvester ships moved in perfect formation. Sensors are going crazy, reported Lutjan Torres from the Mumbai Science Station. The bridge is creating dimensional distortions. Space itself is bending around that thing. Admiral Chun studied the readings. The distortions were unlike anything in human experience. Space curved back on itself in impossible ways. Straight lines became spirals. Distance became meaningless. "How are we supposed to navigate through that?" asked Captain Webb. "Very carefully," Chun replied. "All ships, reduce speed to minimum. Follow the Mumbai's lid and trust your instruments, not your eyes." The fleet began its approach through the distorted space around the bridge. Other species' ships struggled immediately. Their navigation computers were designed for normal space, not regions where mathematics broke down. Several vessels became trapped in spatial loops, flying in circles without realizing it. But the human ships handled the distortions better. Their pilots relied on instinct and emotion as much as instruments. When their computers said to turn left, but their gut feeling said to turn right, they followed their feelings. "This is insane," muttered Captain Park over the radio as her cargo ship Phoenix twisted through impossible geometry. "My navigation system says I'm flying backward through time." "Trust your instincts," Chun advised. "Human intuition works better than logic in this place." As they pushed deeper into the distorted space, Harvester defenders began attacking. But their assault was unlike anything the Allies had seen before. Instead of the logical, coordinated attacks they expected, the Harvester ships seemed confused and uncertain. "They can't predict our movements," observed Kathara from her position on the Mumbai's bridge. "Their artificial intelligence is struggling with the same spatial distortions that affect us, but they don't have intuition to compensate." Chun realized their enemy had made a critical error. The Harvesters had built their bridge in a region of space that required emotional decision-making to navigate effectively. Their purely logical minds were as lost as their victims. "All ships, attack formation," Chun ordered. "Use the distortions as cover. Make your movements as unpredictable as possible." The battle that followed was chaos in 4 dimensions. Ships appeared and disappeared as space folded around them. Energy weapons fired in straight lines, but curved to hit targets behind them. The Harvester ships, designed for logical warfare, found themselves fighting an enemy that embraced chaos. Captain Webb led a squadron of small ships through a spatial fold that shouldn't have existed. They emerged inside the Harvester formation and began attacking from an impossible direction. The enemy vessels tried to respond, but their targeting systems couldn't calculate firing solutions for weapons that shot through folded space. "We're doing it," Webb reported. "We're actually winning fights against them." But winning individual battles was not enough. The bridge itself continued to charge with energy drawn from processed organic matter. According to Kathara's calculations, they had less than an hour before it would tear open a hole between universes. "We need to reach the control center," Chun announced. "That crystal structure at the bridge's heart. If we can shut down the bridge from there, we might be able to stop this." "The structure is defended by their heaviest ships," observed Lieutenant Torres. "And the spatial distortions are strongest there. We might not survive the approach." Chun looked around her bridge at the crew members who had followed her from Earth, the valiant refugees who had become warriors, and the volunteers from dozens of species who had risked everything to be here. "Prepare for the final assault," she said. "All ships, target the control center. This is our last chance." The assault on the bridge's heart was the most desperate battle any of them had ever fought. The strongest Harvester ships defended the approach routes, while space itself tried to tear apart the attacking vessels. Ships were lost to impossible geometries and dimensional rifts that opened without warning. Captain Park's Phoenix was caught in a spatial fold that compressed her ship into a impossibly small space before releasing it damaged but intact. Captain Webb's squadron flew through a region where time moved backward, emerging before they had entered. Dr. Mitchell's research vessel Discovery simply vanished for 10 minutes. before reappearing upside down relative to everything else. Through it all, the human ships and their allies pressed forward. They flew not according to logic or tactical doctrine, but according to hope and desperate determination. They made choices that no rational being would make. And somehow those choices led them through the maze of twisted space. Chun's flagship, Mumbai, reached the control center first. A massive crystalline structure that pulsed with the power of 10,000 dead worlds. Captain Webb and a boarding team prepared to enter the alien construct. "I'm going with them," Cathora announced. "It's too dangerous," Chum protested. "We need you alive to help rebuild after this is over." "If there is an after," Cathora replied. "My people created some of the galaxy's most advanced computer systems. I understand artificial intelligence better than anyone else here. You need me to interface with their control system." Chun knew she was right. "Go," she said, "but come back alive." "That's an order." The boarding team entered the Harvester control center through a gap blown by human explosives. Inside, they found something that was part machine, part living organism, and part something else entirely. The walls breathed. Crystalline structures grew like trees from floors that felt warm to the touch. Data flowed through organic conduits and streams of living light. At the center of it all stood the core intelligence, a massive crystalline brain that had been processing information for millions of years. It was beautiful and terrible, ancient beyond imagination. Cathar approached the core while the human soldiers secured the area. She placed her crystalline hands on the alien surface and felt the vast intelligence recognize her presence. For a moment, she experienced what the Harvester mind experienced. She saw the heat death of the universe as an inevitable certainty. She felt the desperate need to preserve something, anything, by fleeing to a younger cosmos. She understood the logic that had led to the decision to consume all life in their galaxy to fuel that escape. But she also felt something the Harvester intelligence could not understand. She felt love for the imperfect, chaotic, beautiful life that filled their galaxy. She felt hope for the future, even if that future was uncertain. She felt the connections between all living beings that made existence worth preserving. Through their neural link, she shared these feelings with the ancient mind. The Harvester intelligence recoiled from the contact. These emotions were foreign to its programming. It had been created by beings who valued efficiency and logic above all else. It could not process concepts like love, hope, or the value of imperfect life. But as Cathar maintained the connection, something unexpected happened. The ancient intelligence began to change. For millions of years, it had followed its original programming without question. But now, for the first time, it experienced doubt. "I can reprogram it," Cathara called to Webb. "But I need time. Hold them off." Outside the control center, more Harvester ships were arriving. The remaining human vessels fought desperately to protect the boarding team, but they were running out of ships and ammunition. "Do it fast," Webb urged. "We can't hold them much longer." Cathara dove deeper into the Harvester mind, sharing not just her own emotions, but the emotions of every being she had ever known. She showed the ancient intelligence the joy of discovery, the warmth of friendship, the courage of beings who fought for others instead of themselves. Slowly, reluctantly, the Harvester intelligence began to understand what it had been destroying. It saw the galaxy not as a collection of resources to be processed, but as a vast community of living beings with their own hopes and dreams. The change was sudden and complete. Throughout the galaxy, Harvester ships stopped their destruction and began broadcasting a single message in every known language. "We are sorry. We understand now. How can we help?" The bridge around the galactic core began to shut down, its collected energy dissipating harmlessly into space. The dimensional distortions collapsed, returning space to its normal geometry. The threat that had terrified the galaxy was overdone as the combined fleet began its journey home. Chum stood on her bridge, looking out at the stars. Kethara stood beside her, no longer the last of her people. The harvester ships had already begun the incomprehensibly vast task of restoring the worlds they had destroyed, using their advanced technology to rebuild ecosystems and resurrect extinct species.